Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Witchery, Nightside, out July 22nd on Century Media Records. The album has 11 tracks, 35 minutes in length, and this is the band's 8th full-length studio album. They are a Swedish black and thrash speed metal band. As far as the design goes, I think there's going to be maybe two camps right off the bat. One camp is going to say that this album is very compact, very linear, very cohesive. It stays within itself throughout the entire existence. And the other camp perhaps will see how volatile, how dynamic this record is with incredible ebbs and flows from beginning to end. I think both camps are right. This album has a little bit of both worlds. It's not an album that spreads itself really thin. It's not an album that spreads itself really wide. It doesn't change directions. It keeps itself on course from the first to the last song. And because it keeps itself on course, it gives you that sense of balance. It gives you that sense of cohesiveness. But while staying on course, it's still moving up and down. The ebbs and flows are there. That makes the album more fluid, constantly changing the perception that the listener has of the record, allowing you to see different sides of the band and allowing the soundscape to evolve throughout those different sides. You bring those two elements together and you have the perfect format for an album that has this sort of soundscape and for an album that's 35 minutes in length. It actually feels shorter than that. And this is all about the playability. You want to feel like at the end of the record, it's time to go back again to the beginning and experience this journey, this ride all over again. And this album has all the right condiments to force the listener to come back to the start and listen to this album multiple times. You just never get enough of it. It doesn't leave you feeling full. It leaves you feeling satisfied but wanting something more extra at the end of it. Great design. As far as the soundscape is concerned, first of all, I like to say that I like the old school style with the more modern touches as far as the production goes. It matches the overall experience that this band is trying to give. It matches the sound experience, it matches the atmosphere, it even matches the length and design of the record. So I like that style, I like how the album sounds, how it feels, the essence that it creates and the atmosphere that permeates throughout that construction. Really outstanding from start to end. It never deviates. The movement exists, but that doesn't mean it's going to change the overall feel that the album has, the aroma that the album has. That stays very consistent throughout. It's also an album that depends on the influences of the soundscape. It's influenced by obviously thrash metal, speed metal, but even punk and rock. So when you have those influences coming to the table, that's what's going to dictate the ebbs and flows throughout the record. Songs that have more of a speed metal influence burst out, they feel more dynamic, they feel more explosive. Songs that have more of a thrash background, they tend to be a little bit thicker, they tend to be a little bit more methodic, still with some bursts of speed, but in a different way, with a different process. And then you have the more punk rock aspect coming in, allowing everything to have more grit, to feel a little bit more raw, to feel a little bit more edgy. When you have all of these together, you have then that blackened approach that impacts the sound, that impacts the atmosphere, that comes from the production of the record and also from the vocal approach. That is the glue that holds all of these moving pieces together. Once again, allowing the album to feel constant, to feel balanced, to feel cohesive, and still volatile at the same time. Now within the sound, I want to talk about drums, guitars, and bass, but I want to start off with the bass. I love the bass work throughout the entire record. It never really gives me the same output. The way it's put together, the way it's crafted, it's similar from song to song, but the impact that it has on the tracks is completely different. Some songs making the tracks more groovy, some songs adding a little bit more darkness, adding to that blackened aroma that the record has, that those songs have, and in some tracks adding to the momentum of the song, adding to the speed, to the burst of energy that you see coming at you within those tracks. So it's a very interesting approach that feels very uniform from track to track, but with different impacts on how you will perceive those individual songs. Interesting style, interesting idea, works extremely well on a record like this. Now the drums feel a little bit more constant, but obviously there are a few tracks where they are almost overpowering, or at least they feel that way because how consistent they were beforehand. If you have an element that stays very grounded, that never really breaks character, that allows you to feel like they have substance, that they have texture, that they're grounding the album, and then suddenly they gain a little bit more momentum, they gain a little bit more power, they gain a little bit more force, obviously those tracks are going to stand out from a drum's point of view. But that is not necessarily the overall case. That's not necessarily how they're overall designed in order to fit this album. They're there to ground, they're there to bring consistency, they're there to allow the guitars to be more volatile, to allow the guitars to be more driven. And that is what's going to change those ebbs and flows. That movement that I talked earlier, a lot of that is defined by the guitar sound, bringing those speed metal influences, those thrash metal influences, those punk rock influences, deciding exactly where the starting point is and where the finish line is going to be on an individual basis, but keeping that red line consistent from the first to the last song. I love the guitar sound. I love how piercing it is, how raw it is at times, how dark, how blackened it comes across, but still also chunky, still also melodic, allowing to have life and energy that then brings life and energy to the individual tracks. As far as the vocals are concerned, consistency is perhaps the best word to define them, because the beginning keeps itself true all the way throughout to the end. They never really change. There might be a song here and there, like the drums, where they come a little bit lower, where they have a little bit of a lower tone, some backing vocals here and there, some layers here and there, but those are all add-ons. Those are all ripples. When you look at the vocal consistency, it's there. That blackened approach to the vocal delivery really helps that glue. It helps fortify that glue that brings this album together, that allows the sound to have a little bit more movement and not completely lose track of itself within itself. Overall, a very enjoyable sounding record. It has all the right ingredients. It has the right mix, it has the right length, it has the right design, and then the right execution. I really enjoyed this record. This was a fun album to listen to. It goes by so quickly, though it allows you to listen to it more times. I feel like sometimes records go a little bit over their own length, and that hurts the playability of the album, and then listeners gravitate towards the singles. This record, because it's only 35 minutes and it has those ebbs and flows constantly coming at you, you can definitely sit back and enjoy the entire ride on one sitting. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Don't Burn the Witch. This is a magnificent track. What a way to start the record. This is the second song on the album, and it's a great track because it has great tempo, great movement, great bass line. The drums help define the thickness of the sound because the guitars are very penetrating, they're very driven. They really rip through this song, not just with speed, but with the actually sound experience that they carry. They cut like a knife. It's a track that stays very linear. There's not a lot of ebbs and flows throughout this track. Even when it moves from the verses to the chorus, it stays very consistent. The thing that changes perhaps most drastically is how hooky the chorus is, lyrically and vocally. So that becomes a little bit of a calling card and defines the separation that exists between the two momentums of the song. But outside of that is a track that stays consistent, that stays together, but it's galloping towards you from the start all the way to the end. Next you have Storm of the Unborn, a more methodic track. When you compare these two, this one moves a lot slower. It still has all the same principles. Great bass lines, an impactful drum sound that has power but not overpowering, and then the guitars with that piercing sound that just allow you to feel like you're being taken places with them. They are the movement, they are the waters in this river. So all the elements are exactly the same as Don't Burn the Witch. They're just coming at you with a different methodology. This song moves slower, more methodic. It allows to feel thicker. It doesn't have as much of that piercing sound, even though it's still there. The thickness of the overall construction, the thickness of the overall elements, feeling like they're working and moving towards the same goal at the same speed, becomes the DNA of this track all around. Last but not least, Left Hand March. Killer bass. I love the bass throughout the entire record, but the bass on this song is really interesting because it adds thickness. It helps give thickness to the sound. The drums are perhaps a little bit more powerful on this track than in previous tracks, and that takes a little bit from the movement that the song could have. So it becomes a more methodic moving track, but a lot bigger, a lot thicker, a lot heavier than Storm of the Unborn. So you can start to see the patterns. There's a lot of patterns that are emerging from track to track. And this one, you see a continuation of the overall design, of the overall approach from Storm of the Unborn, just bigger, thicker, heavier, more powerful, more demanding sound-wise, almost expanding its foundations, almost expanding its footprint. That is how big this track sounds. That is how big this track feels. This is it. Witchery with Nightside, out July 22nd on Century Media Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.